You know that moment when your day goes from mundane to absolutely ridiculous in about 3 seconds flat? Yeah, that was Tuesday for Jake Murphy. Not that Tuesday was particularly special to begin with. Jake spent most of his time in a beige cubicle at the Department of Administrative something or other, which was government speak for we have no idea what this place actually does. His official title was Senior IT Support Specialist, which sounded impressive until you realized it meant he was the guy people called when their computer made that weird beeping noise, or when they couldn't figure out why their email wasn't working. Spoiler alert, it was usually because they forgot their password. Again, on this particular Tuesday, Jake was performing his most heroic daily task battling the office coffee machine. The thing was older than some of the interns and twice as temperamental. It had been making concerning gurgling sounds for 3 weeks, and everyone kept asking Jake to fix it because apparently knowing how to restart a router made him qualified to repair every piece of technology in the building. "Come on, you caffeinated piece of junk," Jake muttered, wielding a screwdriver like it was Excalibur. "All I want is 1 cup of coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through someone's gym socks." That's when the first explosion happened. Not from the coffee machine, unfortunately. That would have been too normal. No. This explosion came from outside, followed by what sounded like a giant whoosh, like someone had just turned on the world's largest vacuum cleaner. Jake looked up from his mechanical nemesis just in time to see his coworker Dave pressed against the window, his face doing that thing people's faces do when they've just seen something that violates several laws of physics. Jake." Dave's voice cracked like a 13-year-old asking someone to prom. "You might want to see this." Jake reluctantly abandoned his coffee mission and joined Dave at the window. Outside, hovering about 50 feet above the parking lot, was what could only be described as a flying metal donut. Except this donut was the size of a football stadium and was shooting little blue beams at random cars which promptly disappeared in puffs of sparkly light. "Huh," Jake said, with the kind of calm that comes from years of dealing with technology that defies explanation. "That's new." Before Dave could respond with something helpful like screaming, the building shook. The lights flickered. And Jake's nemesis, the coffee machine, finally decided to work perfectly, shooting a stream of scalding coffee directly onto Jake's shoes. "Oh come on," Jake shouted at the universe in general. "Now you decide to work." That's when the blue beam hit the window. The last thing Jake remembered thinking was that this was probably going to be worse than the time someone tried to print a 1,000-page document and crashed the entire network. Then everything went sparkly, and Jake Murphy, Senior IT Support Specialist and part-time coffee machine whisperer, found himself somewhere that definitely wasn't his office. The first thing he noticed was that his shoes were still wet with coffee. The second thing he noticed was that he was standing in what looked like the waiting room of a very expensive, very alien dental office. The walls were that same generic beige color that haunted government buildings everywhere, but they were glowing softly and making a humming noise that sounded suspiciously like dial-up internet. "Great," Jake said to himself. Because talking to yourself is perfectly reasonable when you've just been teleported by space aliens. Just great. I bet they don't even have decent coffee here. Jake didn't have long to contemplate the decor before a door that wasn't there a second ago suddenly was there, sliding open with a sound like someone stepping on bubble wrap. Out strutted what Jake could only describe as a 7-foot-tall purple penguin wearing what appeared to be a military uniform, designed by someone who had only heard fashion described over a bad phone connection. "Greetings, primitive human," the creature announced in a voice that suggested it had been practicing this speech in the mirror. "I am Commander Zeltron of the Galactic Dominion Fleet, subjugator of worlds, destroyer of hope, and winner of 3 consecutive Employee of the Month awards." Jake blinked. "Employee of the Month? Really? That's what you're going with?" Commander Zeltron's chest puffed out with pride. "It is a most prestigious honor in our military structure. I beat out Gerald from accounting by a significant margin." "There's a Gerald in space accounting," Jake said slowly. "Of course there is. Silence, inferior being," Zeltron commanded, though he seemed pleased that Jake was impressed by his accolades. "You have been selected for the honor of witnessing the glorious conquest of your pathetic planet. From this command center, you will observe as we demonstrate the superiority of our advanced technology and strategic brilliance." He gestured grandly toward what Jake assumed was supposed to be an impressive command center. Instead, it looked like someone had taken a Radio Shack from 1995 and painted it purple. Blinking lights covered every surface, but half of them were blinking in what Jake recognized as error patterns. Multiple screens displayed what appeared to be the alien equivalent of the blue screen of death, and one monitor in the corner was just showing a screensaver of flying toasters. "Wow," Jake said, and he meant it. "This is really something. Yes, behold our technological supremacy." Zeltron pointed at a console where another alien, this one resembling a stressed-out flamingo, was frantically pressing buttons. Lieutenant Blix is coordinating our planetary assault using our most advanced tactical systems. Jake watched as Lieutenant Blix's screen displayed an error message that roughly translated to "System cannot find the thing that does the stuff. Please contact your administrator." The lieutenant was making small whimpering sounds. "Commander," Blix called out in a voice tinged with panic. "The invasion fleet management system has crashed again. All I'm getting is error code purple 77 lambda frustrated emoji." Zeltron's confidence wavered for approximately half a second before snapping back into place. "This is merely a minor technical adjustment. Our systems are so advanced that they occasionally transcend normal operational parameters." Jake couldn't help himself. "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" The entire command center went silent. Every alien head turned to stare at Jake as if he had just suggested they try breathing underwater. "What did you say?" Zeltron asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I said, have you tried turning it off and on again? Basic troubleshooting. Works about 60% of the time, every time." Lieutenant Blix looked confused. "Turn it off, but then it would not be on." "Right, and then you turn it back on." Jake explained patiently, using the same tone he used when explaining to his boss why the printer needed paper to print things. "It's called a restart. Clears the memory, resets the system processes, usually fixes whatever got stuck." The aliens exchanged glances that suggested Jake had just revealed the secret of faster-than-light travel, which, knowing government contractors, he probably had. "This primitive suggests we intentionally cease the operation of our systems," Zeltron said to his crew, as if Jake wasn't standing right there. "I can hear you," Jake pointed out. "And yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Look, your system is clearly locked up. See that spinning wheel thing on the screen? That's not supposed to spin forever. That's the universal symbol for something has gone horribly wrong and you should probably restart before it gets worse." Blix looked at his commander hopefully. "Should we attempt the primitive suggestion, sir?" Zeltron struck a dramatic pose. "Very well. If this human's barbaric methods fail, we shall use his failure as entertainment during the victory celebration." Jake shrugged. "Fair enough, just flip that switch there. The big red one that probably says something like primary powers in your language." As Blix reached for the switch, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to become either the galaxy's most unlikely hero or its most convenient scapegoat. Possibly both. Blix flipped the switch. The command center went dark for exactly 3 seconds, during which Jake could hear the collective intake of breath from every alien in the room. Then the lights came back on, the screens flickered to life, and suddenly everything was working. "By the 7 moons of Cletharian," Blix exclaimed, staring at his now functional displays. "The systems are responding. Fleet coordination is online. I can actually see where our ships are." Jake peered over Blix's shoulder at the tactical display. "Oh wow, that's really not good for you guys." The screen showed a neat formation of alien ships surrounding Earth, except half of them were facing the wrong direction. 3 were apparently trying to invade a nearby asteroid, and 1 ship was somehow upside down. "This cannot be correct," Zeltron muttered, his purple complexion turning a disturbing shade of lavender. "Our ships are crewed by the finest military minds in the galaxy." "Yeah, but if your communication system has been down this whole time," Jake said, settling into full IT support mode. "They've probably been flying blind for who knows how long. Look at this ship here." He pointed to a blinking dot on the screen. "According to your sensors, it's been trying to establish orbit around what it thinks is Earth for the past 6 hours. That's the moon." Lieutenant Blix was frantically pressing buttons, and Jake had to admire his dedication to panic. "Commander, I'm receiving dozens of messages from the fleet. They're all asking for directions." "Directions?" Zeltron's voice cracked. "Apparently Ship 7 has been following Ship 12, but Ship 12 has been following Ship 7. They've been flying in circles for 3 days. Also Captain Vorks wants to know if anyone else is getting a weird humming noise from their hyperdrive. And the crew of Ship 15 is asking if we're sure Earth is the blue planet because they're currently pointing at a gas giant." Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a familiar headache coming on. It was the same headache he got when someone called him because their computer wasn't working, and it turned out they hadn't plugged it in. "Okay, let me guess," Jake said. "Your fleet communication system has been glitchy for a while, but you guys figured it was just, one of those things that happens with advanced technology, so you never bothered to actually fix it." The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the humming of the ship's life support systems, which he noticed also sounded like it was running on a Windows 95 processor. "How did you know that?" Zeltron whispered. "Because that's what everyone does with their technology. They just assume it's supposed to be broken and work around it instead of actually fixing the problem. Jake gestured at the command center. I bet half the stuff in here has been giving you error messages for months, and you've all just learned to ignore them. Blix raised a tentative flipper. Well, the navigation system has been saying cannot find servers for about 2 cycles now, but we figured it was just being moody. And the weapons targeting system occasionally displays a message that translates to "Have you fed your cat today?" added another alien from across the room. That's not a feature, Jake said patiently. That's a bug. A really weird bug, but still a bug. He walked over to the navigation console and peered at the screen. It was like looking at the tech support requests he got every day, except instead of affecting whether someone could check their email, these problems were affecting an interstellar invasion. See this? Jake pointed to a dialog box that had clearly been minimized and ignored for weeks. This is your navigation system trying to update its star charts. It's been waiting for administrator approval this entire time. We need administrator approval to update star charts. Blix asked. No, you need to click yes to install the update. But someone set up your system to require admin approval for everything, probably as a security measure, and then forgot to actually approve anything. Jake clicked through the pending updates. Let's see. Star chart updates, communication protocol patches, weapons system calibration, and oh, this is interesting. Your entire fleet has been operating on outdated targeting software. You've been aiming at where Earth was 3 months ago. Zeltron had gone completely pale purple. Are you saying we've been preparing to invade empty space? I'm saying you've been preparing to invade where Earth used to be before it moved in its orbit around the sun. Which is a thing planets do, constantly. The command center erupted in chaos as aliens began running around, shouting things like "Update the star charts." And someone find out where Earth actually is right now. And has anyone seen my password? I wrote it down somewhere. Jake watched the pandemonium with the detached calm of someone who had seen this exact scenario play out in corporate environments across the globe. The only difference was that usually when this happened at his office, the worst-case scenario was someone missing a deadline, not accidentally invading the wrong solar system. You know what? Jake said to Zeltron, who was standing in the middle of the chaos, looking like a commander who had just realized his entire military strategy had been based on MapQuest directions from 2003. I think you guys might need a systems administrator. A what? Zeltron asked weakly. Someone who actually knows how your technology works and can keep it running properly. You know, basic maintenance, regular updates, turning things off and on again when they get stuck. Zeltron looked around at his crew, who were now frantically trying to input Earth's correct coordinates, while the targeting system cheerfully informed them that their password had expired and they needed to create a new one with at least 8 characters, including 1 number and 1 special symbol. Would you? Zeltron began, then stopped, looking like a man who was about to ask for directions after being lost for 3 hours. Would you be willing to provide technical assistance? Jake looked at the chaos around him, at the aliens who had somehow managed to master faster than light travel, but couldn't figure out how to install a software update, and felt something that was either professional pride or professional resignation. Yeah, he said, rolling up his sleeves. Yeah, I can do that. But first we need to talk about your password policies, and your backup procedures. And honestly, your entire IT infrastructure is a disaster. As Jake began his impromptu crash course in basic system administration for beings who could traverse the galaxy but couldn't clear their browser cache, he couldn't help but think that this was still somehow less frustrating than trying to explain to his boss why the office printer needed toner to print things. 3 days later, Jake Murphy had become something he never thought possible, famous across an entire alien fleet. Not the good kind of famous, like winning the lottery, or inventing something useful. The weird kind of famous, like being the guy who could actually make their spaceships work properly. It started with the navigation system. After Jake fixed the star chart updates, word spread through the fleet faster than gossip in a small office. Suddenly every ship captain was calling the command center asking for the human who fixes things. Jake went from prisoner to technical consultant in about 6 hours, which he was pretty sure had to be some kind of record. Human Jake, Commander Zeltron announced on the morning of day 4, you have been granted the rank of Systems Coordinator, Level 7, with all the privileges and responsibilities thereof. Jake looked up from the console where he was trying to figure out why the ship's internal communications kept routing all messages through what appeared to be an alien equivalent of a fax machine from 1987. What exactly does Systems Coordinator, Level 7 mean? It means you get your own coffee mug, Lieutenant Blix said helpfully. Well, our equivalent of coffee, it's more of a nutritional paste, but it's caffeinated. And you get to wear this. Zeltron produced what looked like a badge made from spare computer parts and electrical tape. The insignia of technical competence. Jake stared at the badge. It was definitely the most creative thing anyone had ever made him, even if it did look like it might electrocute him if he wore it too long. You guys made this. Gerald from accounting suggested it. Zeltron said proudly. He said recognition of achievement is important for morale. Gerald from accounting is surprisingly wise, Jake admitted, pinning the badge to his shirt. Okay, but I've got to ask, how did you guys conquer any planets with your systems in this state? The command center went quiet in that particular way. That meant everyone was suddenly very interested in their own screens. Well, Blix said slowly, most planets surrender pretty quickly when they see our fleet approaching. Right, because you look intimidating. Actually, said another alien Jake had been introduced to as Ensign Crix, most of them surrender because they assume we must be incredibly advanced to have made it to their planet at all. They don't realize we've been lost for months and just happened to stumble across them while looking for a gas station. Jake stopped typing. You've been conquering planets by accident. Not entirely by accident, Zeltron protested. We knew we were looking for planets, we just weren't entirely sure which planets, or where they were or how to get to them once we found them. The Zebulon system was particularly awkward. Crix added, we spent 3 weeks orbiting their sun trying to figure out how to contact them, and they finally just called us on an open channel to ask if we needed help. They offered us directions to the nearest inhabited planet, Blix said. Very polite species. We felt bad about conquering them, but it would have been rude to refuse after they were so helpful. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling that familiar IT support headache intensifying. So your entire galactic empire was built on a combination of luck, confused navigation and politeness. And intimidation, Zeltron added defensively. Don't forget intimidation. Right, intimidation. Jake turned back to his screen, where he was dealing with what appeared to be a database that had been designed by someone who thought organization was more of a suggestion than a requirement. Well, that explains why your fleet coordination system thinks Ship 12 is actually a planet called Error 404. Ship not found. His communicator, which was basically a space walkie-talkie, that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts, crackled to life. Command Center, this is Captain Vorthak of Ship 23, came a voice that sounded like it was being filtered through a bowl of gravel. We have a situation here. Our replicator is only producing left shoes, and our waste disposal system has started playing what I can only describe as smooth jazz. Jake keyed the communicator. Captain Vorthak, this is Jake from technical support. Have you tried accessing the replicator's diagnostic menu? The what now? The diagnostic menu. Should be under settings, then advanced options, then the thing that probably translates to fix my broken stuff. There was a pause. Human Jake. Are you the one they call the resolver of technical mysteries? Jake looked around the command center, where every alien was grinning at him with what he assumed were expressions of pride. I guess that's me, yeah. Blessed be your troubleshooting skills. The diagnostic menu worked. It says our replicator pattern buffer was corrupted because someone tried to replicate a sandwich while the system was updating. Yeah, that'll do it. Don't replicate food during system updates. It confuses the molecular assembler. You are truly wise in the ways of technology. Human Jake. After Jake signed off, he noticed Zeltron looking at him with something approaching awe. Human Jake, Zeltron said formally. I believe you have earned another promotion. I've been here for 4 days. Yes, but you have accomplished more in 4 days than our previous systems coordinator accomplished in 4 cycles. What happened to your previous systems coordinator? He quit after the navigation system started displaying error messages in ancient poetry. Said it was either enlightening or a cry for help, but either way, he wasn't qualified to deal with it. Jake's communicator crackled again. This time the voice that came through was different. Deeper, more authoritative, and with the kind of confidence that suggested it was used to being obeyed immediately. Command Center, this is Supreme General Vextar of the Galactic Dominion Command Ship Inevitable Conquest. I need to speak with Systems Coordinator Jake Murphy immediately. Every alien in the command center went rigid. Zeltron's purple complexion turned an alarming shade of white. That's Supreme General Vextar, Blix whispered. He's the most feared military commander in the galaxy. They say he once conquered an entire star system just by looking at it disapprovingly. They also say he's never lost a battle. Crix added in hushed tones. And he knows your name. Zeltron said to Jake, sounding like he was announcing Jake's impending doom. Jake picked up the communicator. This is Jake Murphy. What can I do for you, General? Coordinator Murphy, came the reply, and Jake could hear the relief in the alien's voice. I have been informed that you are the individual responsible for the recent improvements in fleet operational efficiency. I fixed some bugs and updated some software. Yeah. Coordinator Murphy, I need your assistance immediately. Our command ship's primary systems have suffered what our technicians describe as a catastrophic cascade failure of unprecedented complexity. I'm told you specialize in the impossible. Jake looked around at the command center, at the aliens who were all staring at him like he was about to volunteer for a suicide mission, and back at the communicator. General, can you describe the symptoms? Our main computer is displaying a message that says something has gone terribly wrong, and we're not sure what, but have you tried sacrificing a small electronic device to appease the machine spirits? Jake closed his eyes and counted to 10. I'll be right there, sir. As he stood up to leave, Zeltron grabbed his arm. Human Jake, Supreme General Vextar doesn't ask for help. He demands it. And he certainly doesn't call anyone sirs, unless they outrank him. He didn't call me sir. He called you Coordinator Murphy. In our military structure, that's the same thing. Jake, I think you may have just become the highest-ranking technical officer in the entire Galactic Dominion. Jake looked down at his improvised badge made of computer parts and electrical tape. Then at the communicator that was probably about to summon him to fix the problems of the most powerful military commander in the galaxy. You know what? He said. I'm not even surprised anymore. But I'm definitely asking for a raise. The teleportation to Supreme General Vextar's command ship was Jake's second experience with alien transportation technology, and he had to admit it was an improvement over the first time. Instead of the disorienting sparkly sensation, this felt more like stepping through a really cold doorway that happened to be made of electricity. Still weird, but at least his shoes stayed dry. He materialized in what was clearly the bridge of the most advanced warship in the alien fleet, which meant it looked like someone had taken the bridge of the Enterprise, and then let a committee of engineers with severe organizational disorders redesign it while blindfolded. Screens covered every surface, displaying what appeared to be the galaxy's most comprehensive collection of error messages in 17 different languages. Standing in the center of this technological disaster was Supreme General Vextar himself, and Jake had to admit the guy was impressive. 9 feet tall, with 4 arms, scales that shifted color like an angry mood ring, and wearing a uniform that somehow managed to look both terrifyingly militaristic and surprisingly well-tailored. He was also, Jake noticed, standing very carefully in the one spot on the bridge where none of the screens were currently displaying error messages. Coordinator Murphy, Vextar said, and his voice carried the kind of authority that suggested he was used to entire star systems rearranging themselves when he spoke. Thank you for responding so quickly. No problem, General. So what exactly is going on here? Vextar gestured with 2 of his 4 arms at the chaos surrounding them. 47 hours ago, our primary command systems began experiencing what our technical staff initially described as minor glitches. These minor glitches have now escalated to what can only be described as a complete breakdown of everything we depend on to not die horribly in the vacuum of space. Jake walked over to the nearest console, which was displaying a message that read, "Critical error, system has encountered a problem it doesn't understand, doesn't want to understand, and frankly finds personally offensive. Please contact someone who knows what they're doing." Okay, that's actually kind of helpful, Jake said. At least it's honest about not knowing what's wrong. Most systems just give you a generic error code and expect you to figure it out. Our navigation system, Vextar continued, currently believes we are inside a black hole, which is concerning because we are clearly not inside a black hole, but the system is insisting we take appropriate precautions anyway. It has been playing funeral dirges for the past 6 hours. And our weapons systems, added a smaller alien who Jake assumed was some kind of technical officer, have decided that all of our targets are actually birthday parties, so instead of firing destructive energy beams, we're launching what appears to be confetti and small cakes. Jake looked around the bridge, taking in the full scope of the disaster. This wasn't just a few bugs or some corrupted files, this was what happened when an entire system architecture had been held together with digital duct tape and good intentions for so long that reality itself had started to get confused. General, can I ask you something? Jake said, settling into his professional troubleshooting mode. How long has it been since you've done a complete system overhaul? Vextar's scales shifted to what Jake was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of looking uncomfortable. Define complete system overhaul. Like wiping everything clean and starting fresh with updated software, new drivers, proper configuration management, maybe some actual documentation of how things are supposed to work. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the distant sound of what was probably the ship's air recycling system struggling with what sounded like a digital asthma attack. We've never done that, the technical officer said quietly. Our systems have been continuously upgraded for over 3,000 cycles. We just keep adding new components on top of the old ones. Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. So you're telling me that your command ship is running on a 3,000-year-old operating system that's been patched and updated and modified so many times that nobody actually knows how it works anymore. That's surprisingly accurate, Vextar admitted. Our technical manuals are currently 7 million pages long, and approximately 60% of them contradict the other 40%. And the remaining 40%, those are the pages that just say we're not sure why this works, but don't touch it, or everything will break. Jake nodded slowly. This was actually worse than the time his company had tried to upgrade their accounting software and discovered that their entire financial system was dependent on a program that someone had written in 1987 and then forgot to document. At least that was only money. This was a warship floating in space with weapons systems that thought everything was a birthday party. Okay, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. I'm going to need access to your root directory, your system logs for the past, let's say 2 weeks, and probably a very large cup of whatever passes for coffee on this ship. Root directory, the technical officer asked. The core system files, the stuff that controls how everything else works. Oh, you mean the sacred files of mysterious purpose that were forbidden to look at because the last person who tried disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Jake paused. They disappeared. Well, they quit and moved to a nice planet with good weather and no technology more complex than a toaster, Vextar clarified. But it was very suspicious. They left a note that just said I can't take it anymore, and why does the coffee maker need its own IP address? Your coffee maker has an IP address. Everything has an IP address, the technical officer said proudly. The doors, the lights, the bathroom facilities, the cafeteria utensils. We have the most networked ship in the fleet. Jake felt a familiar sinking feeling. And are all of these devices password protected? Of course, every device has its own unique password for maximum security. And where do you keep track of all these passwords? In a file called Passwords on the desktop of the main computer. Jake sat down heavily in the nearest chair, which immediately began playing what sounded like a welcoming jingle, followed by a request for him to rate his sitting experience on a scale of 1 to 10. General, Jake said, I think I know what your problem is. Please, Vextar said, and Jake could hear the desperation in his voice. Our entire invasion schedule is on hold. We have 17 different species waiting to be conquered, and we can't even figure out how to turn our weapons back on. The Confederation of Peaceful Worlds has been sending us strongly worded letters asking when we're going to get around to oppressing them because they've cleared their schedules for the next month. Jake stood up, ignoring the chair's request for feedback on his sitting experience. Your problem isn't hardware, and it's not really software either. Your problem is that you've been treating your computer systems like magic instead of like machines. You've been adding complexity on top of complexity without understanding what you're doing, and now you've reached the point where your own technology is smarter than you are but not smart enough to actually work properly. So what do we do? Jake looked around the bridge, at the screens full of error messages, at the aliens who had somehow managed to conquer most of the galaxy while running on what was essentially a 3,000-year-old computer held together by hope and stubbornness. We're going to do something that's going to sound absolutely terrifying to you. Jake said, we're going to simplify everything. Vextar's scales went through several different colors before settling on what Jake was pretty sure was the alien equivalent of pale green. Simplify. We're going to remove about 90% of the unnecessary complexity, update everything to actually work together, and implement some basic security practices that don't involve putting all your passwords in a file called passwords. Is this going to hurt? Jake smiled. General, I'm going to introduce you to the most powerful concept in the universe, proper system administration. Your ships are going to run better than they have in centuries. Your weapons will hit what you aim at. Your navigation systems will know where you are and where you're going. And your coffee makers will make coffee instead of trying to achieve sentience. The coffee makers are trying to achieve sentience. Level 7 in the break room has been asking philosophical questions about the nature of caffeine for the past 2 weeks, the technical officer admitted. We've been avoiding that floor. Jake cracked his knuckles. Right, let's get started. This is going to be the most epic system restore in galactic history. 2 hours later, Jake Murphy had achieved something that military historians would later describe as either the greatest technological miracle in galactic history or the most comprehensive IT support ticket ever resolved. Possibly both. The process had been surprisingly straightforward once Jake convinced everyone to stop treating their computers like ancient artifacts that might curse them if disturbed. Step 1 was changing all the passwords from things like password 123 and admin to something slightly more secure. Step 2 was updating drivers that hadn't been touched since some alien equivalent of Windows XP. Step 3 was the big one, cleaning out 3 millennia worth of accumulated digital junk. Coordinator Murphy, General Vextar said. watching in amazement as his bridge displays began showing actual useful information instead of error messages written in ancient poetry. How did you know that our entire fleet network was being slowed down by 17 million temporary files that nobody had ever deleted? Jake shrugged, watching as the weapons systems finished rebooting and promptly stopped trying to throw birthday parties for enemy targets. It's the same on every network I've ever worked on. People install programs, uninstall programs, update programs, and never clean up after themselves. Eventually you end up with so much digital debris that your system spends more time looking for files than actually running programs. And the navigation issue. Your star charts were fine. Your navigation system was just trying to calculate routes using a database that included every single course correction you'd ever made for the past 1,000 years, including that time someone apparently tried to navigate to a planet that turned out to be a large sandwich. Vextar's scales shifted to what Jake had learned was embarrassment. In our defense, it was a very convincing sandwich. The crew of Ship 42 spent 3 days in orbit before someone realized their mistake. The bridge's main view screen flickered to life, displaying a tactical overview that actually made sense. Ships appeared where they were supposed to be, heading in the directions they were supposed to be going, with targeting systems that could distinguish between enemy vessels and birthday celebrations. "Sir," called out the technical officer, "I'm receiving reports from across the fleet. Navigation systems are functioning normally. Weapons are properly calibrated, and the coffee makers have stopped asking existential questions about their purpose in the universe." "What are they doing instead?" Jake asked. "Making coffee, sir. Really good coffee. Apparently they've been working on perfecting their brewing algorithms for decades, but couldn't implement them because they were too busy having an identity crisis." Jake's communicator crackled with incoming messages from across the fleet. Ship captains were calling in to report that systems they'd assumed were supposed to be broken were now working perfectly. The replicator that had only been producing left shoes was now producing matching pairs. The waste disposal system had stopped playing smooth jazz and returned to its normal function of disposing of waste without providing a soundtrack. "Coordinator Murphy," came a voice over the comm. "This is Captain Zorthak of Ship 15. We've just discovered that our ship has a gymnasium, a library, and what appears to be a small arboretum. Were we supposed to know about these?" Jake looked at Vextar, who was examining a newly functional display that was showing a complete schematic of his command ship. "General, did you know your ship had an arboretum? I thought that room was just making concerning plant noises because it was broken," Vextar admitted. "Turns out it was trying to grow food for the crew, but the environmental controls were stuck on Arctic tundra mode." The communications system chimed with an incoming priority message. Jake half expected it to be another technical crisis, but instead, a dignified voice came through the speakers. "This is Ambassador Quillex of the Confederation of Peaceful Worlds. We're calling to inquire about the status of our scheduled conquest. We've prepared surrender documents and arranged for appropriate dramatic lighting, but your fleet seems to be functioning properly now. Should we reschedule?" Vextar looked at Jake, then at his bridge crew, then at the displays showing a fleet that was actually capable of doing what it was supposed to do. "Ambassador Quillex," Vextar replied, "I'm afraid we're going to have to postpone your conquest indefinitely." "Oh, is there a problem with your invasion schedule?" "No, the problem is that our invasion schedule is working perfectly now, and we've realized that conquering peaceful worlds who want to be conquered defeats the entire purpose of conquest." There was a pause. "That's actually quite thoughtful of you, General. Would you be interested in a trade agreement instead? We make excellent pastries. I'll have my people contact your people," Vextar said. Vextar out. He turned to Jake, his scales cycling through what appeared to be the full spectrum of colors available to his species. "Coordinator Murphy, in fixing our technology, you've made us realize that most of our conquests were the result of poor planning, miscommunication, and accidentally showing up at planets while lost. And now that your systems work properly, now we actually have to think about what we're doing, and why we're doing it." Vextar gestured at the bridge, where aliens were efficiently managing systems that Jake was pretty sure they were understanding for the first time in their careers. "We've been so busy dealing with technical problems, that we never stopped to consider whether galactic conquest was actually what we wanted to be doing." Jake's communicator chimed with another message. This one from Commander Zeltron. "Human Jake, the Fleet Admiralty has been discussing your contributions to our operational efficiency. They would like to offer you a position as Chief Technology Officer of the Galactic Dominion, with a salary that translates to roughly 17 million of your Earth currency units per year, plus full medical benefits and a company shuttle." Jake looked around the bridge, at the aliens who were discovering that their technology could actually help them instead of constantly fighting against them, at the displays showing a fleet that was no longer held together by digital duct tape and wishful thinking. That's a very generous offer, Jake said finally, but I'm going to have to pass. The bridge went silent. Vextar's scales went through several colors that Jake was pretty sure didn't have names. You're declining? Vextar asked. I'm declining the job, but I'll make you a deal. Send me back to Earth. Promise you'll call if you have any more tech problems, and maybe we can work out some kind of consulting arrangement. Help you guys avoid accidentally conquering people. Maybe set up some proper IT support training for your crews. You would do this? Jake smiled. General, I've been doing tech support for government agencies for 10 years. Trust me, helping a galactic empire figure out basic computer maintenance is actually a step up from my usual workload. At least you guys appreciate it when someone fixes your problems. An hour later, Jake found himself back in his office cubicle, staring at the coffee machine that had started this whole adventure. It was still making concerning gurgling sounds, but somehow that seemed less important now. On his desk was a small device that looked like a smartphone designed by someone who had only heard smartphones described in a fever dream. It was his direct line to the Galactic Dominion IT support system, which he was pretty sure made him the only help desk technician in human history with interstellar clients. His computer chimed with an email from his boss. Jake, the coffee machine is making weird noises again. Can you take a look at it when you get a chance? Also, there are some reports that people saw UFOs yesterday, but they apparently left without conquering anyone. Weird, right? Thanks, Dave. Jake looked at the coffee machine, then at his alien communicator, then back at the coffee machine. You know what? He said to the empty office. I think I'll start with the easy problems first. He picked up his screwdriver, and approached the coffee machine, which gurgled at him in what might have been greeting or threat. Either way, Jake Murphy, Senior IT Support Specialist, and part-time savior of galactic civilization, was ready for whatever technical challenge came next. After all, he'd already turned the entire universe off and on again. How hard could one coffee machine be?